Hey folks, so I recently taught Beyond the Sun, a game that I think is not super difficult to jump into, but that has a few strategies that might not be immediately apparent. And since this game is a little less complicated than what I usually teach, a few of these tips are going to be a little bit more specific than what I usually provide. So let's get started with my top 5 beginner strategies for Beyond the Sun. When choosing which techs you want to research first, I would almost always recommend choosing 2 level 1 techs that are next to each other. The reason for this is that after doing so, you have more level 2 tech options to choose from in the future, meaning that you'll likely draw more event cards, which can be pretty valuable. To that end, it's also a good idea to avoid completely overlapping with any one player if you're going later in the turn order. They'll just take what you've been aiming for and you'll be stuck with the leftovers. It's not terrible, but if you want an edge in the game, it's not the way to go. By this, I'm of course referring to your food production discs, which in my opinion are a little more important than ore production. You'll always be able to get at least one ore, but if you aren't advancing your population, you can absolutely run out of usable people, which can put you in a pretty tight bind. Placing outposts is great, but if you can automate your discs, that's even better. Unless you have a very solid colonization engine, automation is just more reliable if you can find it. Of course, that doesn't mean you can just ignore space. In fact, while that tech board will take a lot of your attention, I think that colonization is a better way to earn points. There's no need to rush it. In fact, you should go for tech a little more in the early game. But once you're able to start colonizing planets, it's a very lucrative strategy. If you're playing with advanced factions, some of them are going to be better at it than others. But even if you're a more science-focused group, that doesn't mean you can forget about these planets. It just means you need to. It can be easy to get into a tug of war with another player, constantly putting more ships into a system to try and colonize the next turn, only for them to take it away from you. And occasionally blocking an opponent is a good strategy, but you'll often get more benefit by avoiding the tug of war, and instead looking for a more surgical approach. If another player is about to spend a lot of ships on a planet, that also means that they're about to have a lot less ships on the map, meaning that you can spread out a bit more or condense your ships on the next system to come up. You can't plan too far in advance in this game, but you should at least have your next turn mapped out as you're taking your current one. And with that in mind, Beyond the Sun can end faster than you might think. They say the average length is about 15 rounds, and they'll go by real quick if you aren't paying attention. There's a lot that you can keep an eye out for, but for your first game, just make sure to pay attention to the achievements and how close your opponents are to completing them. Once a single achievement is claimed, it's likely that the game is coming to a close, so it's time to start figuring out the best ways to get points with just a few rounds left. And those are my top 5 beginner strategy tips for Beyond the Sun. If you have some tips of your own, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And make sure to check out what other people have written. My viewers tend to have some pretty good ideas, so there's usually some good stuff in there. Also, I leaned a bit on a BGG post while writing the script for this, and it went into a little more detail than I go here. So if you want to dive a bit deeper, I put a link to it in the description box below. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.